Good. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and call the meeting to order. Justin, will you please do the roll call?
Aaron Sandine.
Here.
Tom Lennon. Joe Anderson. Michael Brader.
Here.
William Bunn.
Here.
Steve Campbell.
Here.
Doug Chappell.
Here.
Patrick Hancock.
Here.
Jan Howe. Gilbert Arantia.
Here.
William Pribble.
Here.
Jeff Rayner.
Here.
Brian Savage.
Here.
Dwayne Wade. Mike Worrell.
Here.
And we have a commission. Or quorum.
Commission quorum. Thank you, Justin. Appreciate it. Very full agenda as always. Action packed. Lots of information. We only have one action item this week, though. With that, that's section 2, including the minutes. So, any questions or changes to the meeting minutes? If not, I'll take a motion to approve.
So moved. Second.
Thank you, Douglas. Thank you. All those in favor of approving the July 17th minutes, say aye.
Aye.
With that, the meeting minutes are approved. The first action item is the Arizona Minimum Equipment Standard. Michael Britt to give us an update.
We're here to present the minimum equipment standards state. Back in January, the SIEC started reviewing the standards that were written back in 2007. Working through the SIEC and the Interoperable Channel Plan Working Group, there was a general consensus that the VHF and UHF equipment standards were okay the way they were. We decided we needed to add the 700 and 800 megahertz equipment to the standards. And originally there were separate standards for VHF and UHF. We decided to combine all frequencies into one standard document. Back in May, we reviewed a draft of the SIEC and took some suggestions and adjusted the document accordingly. And then we had it out for public review, and August 14th it was approved by the SIEC. All right, the approach we took, the original document had some blend of standards, requirements, guidance, and so forth. We decided to break that into one section of why we're doing this, where it came from, and what the intent. And then a separate section that was entirely related to the standards themselves. On the standards, for all frequency or bands, 48 channels or greater, 7 characters in the display. Required to be narrow banded, and that's soon to be coming to a close to even mention that anymore at the end of the year. And then P25 capable for the VHF and UHF are required for 7 and 800. And this is up for approval by the PSCC. If you approve it, it'll get posted on our website and distributed to our interested parties.
Any questions from any commissioners?
Was any consideration given to cost and that type of thing, or purely from a technical standpoint?
The reason we went with the that's almost the bare minimum in terms of the cost factor, and the group felt that we tried to keep it as realistic as possible for those without much budget. Yeah, so that was that.
Any other questions? I don't know if you can hear that on the phone. Any questions from anybody?
I didn't know anything. No.
Thank you. So with that, I think the motion that we're looking for is an approval to make these changes to the Arizona minimum equipment standards, correct, Mike?
Correct. Still approval, so moved.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
With that, the motion is approved. Thank you very much, Michael. Next on the agenda item is an Arizona All Hazards Communications Unit Training and Recognition Program.
And this is actually a two-parter. I'm going to start with background on the training and recognition program for the communications unit leaders. And then we're going to move forward. I'll be asking approval on the draft procedure, which will be expanding this program. So, like I mentioned, history background, I will talk about the recent updates, especially to this document, which I'm asking for approval on. After the recommended revisions have been reviewed, hopefully you get approval.
Susan, can you make sure they can read, please?
Yes, can you hear me on the phone okay?
Yes.
Fantastic. Okay, back in 2008, in October, Department of Homeland Security, Office of Emergency Communications, put out a bulletin, I believe it was 294. It basically announced the newly developed COML training program that they were pushing out. It also gave information that provided a background on the course slightly, and they provided additional material outside of the bulletin telling the state that they would be in charge of developing their own COML recognition program. So moving forward from that in late 2008, in 2009, OEC began the actual rollout of the program. That's when this body, this commission, tasked its subcommittee, the SIEC, Statewide Interoperability Executive Committee, with forming policy recommendations in this area. Throughout 2009 and 2010, the work group did exactly that. The work group was staffed by subject matter experts as well as PSCC office staff. And they addressed issues related to logistical requirements for the courses, as well as the certification process and looking toward other states to develop a process that would work in Arizona. In 2010, this commission also approved the incorporation of a strategic initiative in the Statewide Communications Interoperability Plan. Within that initiative, there was a strategic objective, 10.4, to implement a COML training and recognition or training program and determine the credentialing protocol. Doing that added some oomph, I think, to the movement of where you'll see us moving forward. In alignment with that objective, the working group drafted the original Arizona Regional COML recognition procedure. You'll notice the name has changed. We'll kind of walk through that. That recognition procedure was approved by the PSCC in July of 2010. And in the following month, in August of 2010, the subcommittee, the SIEC, officially formed the NISTU work group, the National Incident Management Systems Communications Unit work group. They approved that body's policies and procedures. A little bit of information on the work group. It is the official body that reviews the candidate information, and if a candidate is qualified, they can be recognized as an Arizona Regional All Hazards COML. They do so under the direction of SIEC. They also do so with the help of the PSCC office to provide administrative support. The work group members, according to their policies and procedures, are required to have knowledge of the skills and abilities, the positions within the communications unit. They do serve until replaced, and the SIEC can take action at any time if they want to replace anyone on that work group. A little bit later in 2010, in October, the SIEC appointed the first 5 individuals to that work group. All 5 members are still on that work group. No additional members have been added, and that group did start reviewing application materials last year. At the state level, that kind of brings everyone up to speed up through last year as far as from what this commission and what the SIEC and the work group did moving forward. At the state level, of course, we recognize the importance of utilizing people who have the proper training, who are ready to be COMLs, ready to be deployed. In association with developing the recognition program, which I've already mentioned, training was a part of it, became stronger last year. and our office has been updating our website with materials. In addition, we've been providing outreach during the COML and COMT courses so that students aren't just taking the course and walking away. We are trying to build that bridge with them. Additionally, during the National Emergency Communications Plan Goal 2 assessments that were conducted throughout 2011, it was identified that there was a need for additional COML training and additional utilization of the COML throughout the state. That also goes back up to the federal level. At a national level, the need to train and certified qualified personnel has been reaffirmed. In fact, OEC has started putting out more material. If you notice on the back table, in fact, we have a nice big brochure about COML and how they are important in ICS. That's the first sub-bullet that's noted. OEC developed that brochure, the COML, a valuable resource for incident commanders. Not only do we have the hard copies today, but we've also posted a link to that on our website. They have recently put up, which I ran across in the last month, an informational video with Chris Essett talking about the National COML Training Program and its importance. And last, and this spilled over into the next slide, OEC is conducting more outreach to talk to states and statewide interoperability coordinators about the importance of having a formalized program, because there are many states that don't have a formalized program yet. People are going through the training, but after the training, when they get to the task book portion that they need to complete, even if they complete it, there's no next step. So we're ahead of many states in that respect. As I said, this is kind of bleeding over into the next slide. The resources that OEC posted online are a complement to something that they're also doing in coordination with the National Council of SWCS. They are putting together a series of best practice webinars. Tennessee was the first state that they featured. Arizona is the second state. We were actually featured in July. The credentialing webinars are basically a way to get out information with varying approaches, because one thing I've noticed, no two states are the same in how they credential COML. Similar, but not the same. They want to get those ideas across to other states so that they can pick and choose what works for them and have some material to start from. As I mentioned, the Arizona, our program was featured in July. Lisa was on that conference. I was on that conference. And Lisa did provide an overview of our program. I spoke to the training. We did record that, and it will be posted on our website. Before I move on to the training, as far as the recognition program side, are there any questions? Okay. We're going to start with the COML training. Currently, it's a 4-day course. It started off as a 3-day, 24-hour course, and then last year it was officially turned into a 4-day course, or it's expanded. They are now moving back to a 3-day course. When we receive information that that's an official changeover date, we will let our stakeholders know. The courses must be taught by 2 DHS-approved COML instructors. There are 2 databases, the Office of Emergency Communications and EMI, Emergency Management Institute, so they've actually married those 2 together, so there's a single DHS-approved COML instructor list. Those individuals train emergency responders to serve as COML. When the program was initially rolled out in 2009, 6 courses were held in the state. As you can see, they started in June 17th, and the last one wrapped up on October 1st. They were throughout the state, up north, up in Flagstaff, down into Sierra Vista. I know we have some people from Sierra Vista here. 5 of the 6 were provided through Phoenix Fire federal grant award. And one of the 6, the final one that was in Cochise County, was from the federal rollout program. They did bring a COML class to every state. Now, after students attended those classes in 2009, as you noticed from the timeline earlier, we haven't moved forward that much on the recognition program, so there was a bit of a disconnect. Last year in 2011, it really was kind of the end of 2010 and into the beginning of 2011, the COML class went through a phase where it was given a FEMA name, so it was FEMA approved, which meant it wasn't just a class that you could teach on your own. You actually had to go out and follow the Emergency Management Institute policies and procedures. Part of those policies and procedures that they pushed out from the national level required the SWIC to work with the state training officer. Thus came the Arizona Communications Unit Training Coordination Procedure, which describes the process for how we put on these courses at a high level, how the SWIC office works with the state training officer at the Arizona Division of Emergency Management. The SIEC approved this procedure on March 15th of last year, and it does note that course enrollment occurs using IRMA, which is a program that they use over at ADEM. This allows there to be one area where anyone who enrolls for COML, all of these records are kept in IRMA. Additionally, the PSCC office, it is not like that in many other states I've found. More recent COML training will step forward from 2009 using the training coordination procedure and working with our partners over at ADEM and also with the counties who help to host the courses. We put on several more classes. In 2011, the first one, October 17th through the 20th, was in Phoenix. That was with the help of their emergency manager, Pete Weaver. We used the county training funds that were with ADEM. Beyond that, we worked with the emergency managers in each of the counties. Anywhere that you see funding source 2010, i.e. CGP, we absolutely relied on coordination with the counties to put those courses on. So in Kingman, Tucson, Sierra Vista this year, and Flagstaff this year. There was a course February 7th through the 10th this year, which was held in Glendale. That was an EMI-sponsored course. EMI actually swooped out with a bunch of unit leader courses. Unfortunately, there wasn't the amount of coordination that we would have preferred before the course came, but when it was here, we worked very closely with ADEM. I was actually able to attend the first and last day of class to share program information with those students. So even the courses that we're not directly putting on with our funds, we are still working with the instructors. We do have additional funds left over, so we are planning more courses into 2013. There is one scheduled now that is in Yuma. It'll be October 22nd through the 25th. That information is posted on our website, and for anyone who's here today, we do have the course announcement in the back. Okay, that was COML training. COMT training. This one is a little bit more technical. It's a 5-day course as opposed to a 4 or 3-day course. Again, it's led by 2 trained and federally recognized instructors. Emergency responders are trained on practices and procedures common to the COMT. A lot of it is hands-on with technology. Because of the technical nature of this course, it is limited to 15 students. So it is not a course that we put out for open enrollment like we do with the COML courses. So far, we've held 2 in Arizona. The first was last October. It's actually here in Tucson. That was through an OEC Technical Assistance Award. And then more recently, in April, Phoenix had a course. They utilized Central RAC Shishget 2011 funds, State Homeland Security Grant Program funds. We do have some leftover funds from that grant. So moving forward, we're planning another course in Phoenix. They just have that many students. And hopefully we'll be able to put on another COMT course in Yuma as well. COML Field Day. I know that it says COML. Technically, think Communications Unit Field Day. We are planning to offer this field day. We've been making announcements leading up. Truthfully, we were hoping to have offered it already. Because of some procurement delays, I have my bullet down at the bottom. We've been delayed due to unforeseen circumstances, and right now, we are still going through the procurement process to award funds to be able to finish developing that field day so that we can offer it. Of course, when we know, we will send information out for interested parties list. We'll post it on our website. I'll present it in a meeting, I'm sure. The purpose of the field day, it will be a single day, is to provide more hands-on training to allow the emergency responders, truthfully, to get better at the tasks that they need to perform to be a COML. The COML task book that is given to individuals at the end of the class, they have to complete. There are 27 tasks. This field day will not allow them to complete all 27 tasks, but we are hoping that there will be a good handful, some of the tasks that are more difficult to complete, that they'll be able to be signed off on. This is our numbered announcement.
Susan?
Yes.
Can you talk to them how you're designing this in terms of with the goal in mind of the task books and also the COMT
The goal in mind I didn't touch that. The task books, which I mentioned, which have 27 tasks, the COML must complete all of those tasks at least one time. If it's only done once, it should probably be in a large incident. It gives some leeway. There could be multiple events that are used to demonstrate experience in the task book. Similarly, the communications unit technicians, the COMTs, also have a task book. Theirs is truthfully a smaller version of the COML task book. It's 17 tasks versus 27, but they are very similar. So the way that we're hoping to develop this, some of you may be familiar with what's called a COMLEX or a COML exercise, where an exercise scenario is developed for a group of individuals to run throughout the COML to complete tasks on their task book. We've veered off from that a little bit to offer, as I said, more of a hands-on training atmosphere. It won't have the direct focus necessarily on skills that take more time, like management. That's one of the areas that's assessed in the task book. So what we're hoping to do is provide more of the hands-on technical information that the COML has taken the class has been asking for. I've actually had a lot of individuals come up to me after the class and say, great, we hear COMT is more hands-on. Can I take COMT as well? Well, the purpose of this is to help share that knowledge. We can't funnel everyone that's taken a COML class through COMT. So we want to bring both of those groups together in a field day with individuals that are already recognized, certified, and recognized as COML to be able to share their information, move them forward, and also create a networking opportunity where those individuals who are signing off on task books, we've had some people express that they find difficulty getting to events or being in a position of COML, for example, that finding training in some of the more rural areas is difficult. We're hoping that this networking opportunity will help some of the recognized COMLs bring some more people under their wings and help with the training forward. Did that answer your question okay, Lisa?
It answered a lot of questions. Excellent. One other sort of sub-item of that, can you talk about how you're going to determine which of the 27 or 17 tasks you're going to focus on in the field day?
We went ahead and put out a survey. Last year we actually put out a couple of surveys. But we asked individuals who had completed the COML training to give us a better idea of which specific tasks they were struggling to complete. So we're using that information. One of the tasks that popped into my head is establishing an incident communication center, an ICC. So there are some people that don't necessarily have the opportunity to do these particular tasks, or maybe they don't see how they can create an opportunity perhaps during a planned event. So we're using the information from the survey as well as subject matter experts. I'm working with the work group, our NIMSU work group, to kind of filter down to what we need. A lot of that planning, Lisa, will happen after we complete the procurement process, and we're actually working with the vendor to develop that planned schedule for that 8-hour day so that we can really drill down to what's realistic. We don't want to just push people through 15 task areas when they're not getting the most out of it. If we have to focus on maybe 5 to 7 because that's more realistic and they will get more knowledge, then that's what we'll do. So back to the number snapshot, this is specific to the COML. We have 18 recognized COMLs. They represent agencies now from 5 counties. This resource list is noted in our procedure, which we'll be discussing in a moment, and of course it is posted online. As far as for the number of people who have been trained versus the number of people who have been recognized, we put this information up. It's listed out by discipline, and it's not because I picked any favorites. These are actually the disciplines that the Office of Emergency Communications was focused on and information they had in their database for the webinar that we worked in coordination with them. At this point, I want to say that 18 out of 186, we're running above 8%, which is huge. That's actually more than expected. When you put on a course or you talk to people at the national level about putting on a COML course, a lot of people ask, okay, if you train the people, how many of the people who complete training will actually complete a task book? The numbers are low. Most people say 3 to 5%. Anyone who says more than 15%, I personally would ask which class they've been to and to help me be more successful because those numbers are huge. In our case, just above 8% is really good. Now, if we use the term recognize, these are the individuals that have completed their task book, they've been signed off by their agency, and beyond that, they've pushed it up to our office, it's been reviewed by the work group, and the work group has recognized them. There could be several other individuals who are certified COMLs working for their agencies, but they have not pushed it up to the Arizona regional level. So please don't think that we're limited to only 18. There are likely more individuals out there that are certified. There could be, we'll put it that way. All right, the document review process in our most recent update. There are 3 procedures, which I mentioned them very briefly. The actual recognition procedure, which we'll be looking at today, the training coordination procedure, and the NIMS communications unit work group procedure. Those are the 3 that are in the body of SOPs.
I'm sorry, I'm going to interrupt one more time. Could you go back? So how does anybody find out who these people are if they want to try to utilize these resources?
If they want to utilize the individuals who are recognized, they can go to the link that we've provided. The resource list is posted. The information that's posted is not just the individual's name. Bob Hollister, you're in the audience. I'm going to use you as an example because I can see you. Bob Hollister is one of our Arizona regional COMLs. He is on the list. His name is there. It's listed out. It's listed out by county, so you can find the individuals by county. After you find their name, it provides the agency information to the agency that certified them. So there's no personal contact information. If you want to call up and use this individual as a resource, you do have to follow the appropriate chain of command and contact their agency. Likewise, if anybody needs this information, they can contact our office. I'm happy to provide it. We do provide this information to the Division of Emergency Management. So if something were to occur that they were contacted instead, they also have access.
And of the 186 that are trained, do we have a breakdown to show which ones in which counties? One who's been trained and stuff for analysis for future classes. Have you guys done that analysis?
We haven't done that yet. We haven't done that in a packaged way, but we do have that information because I have all of the course rosters in a database. I can sort it by their locations. One of the issues that we have is some people, they listed their agency, but not necessarily their home address, so we would have to look. It's not consistent information as far as for the addresses that we'd be checking. So I could put that together in something that's a nice package. We do look at that information to see how many people were trained in the past. I actually have a beautiful map in my folder for where we've had each course and how many students have completed it. So I do have it, just not in a report form.
Right. So we do that analysis to target future classes to make sure we're covering the state effectively. Thank you.
Sorry, you're looking at Okay. Back to the review process. These documents I mentioned, the 3 procedures, they were all reviewed last year as well, so this is now the 2012 version. Back on June 26th, the NIMSU work group, the members were kind enough, I think they don't mind sitting down with me now, but they sat down with me to work through the policies and procedures and make the changes where we needed to make them. They weren't just doing it on their own, of course. We'd already presented to the SIPC, and we were following the guidance of the committee as well as federal guidance that we see coming down. We know this is expanding as evidenced by the fact that we're starting to so we knew that this program needed to move in a more encompassing direction as far as for the entire communications unit, not just limited to COML. The groups, when we met, also used information from other states. I have a document with me that they took a look at what was expected. Indiana, Oklahoma, very similar to ours, a number of other states to see where they were headed, and also moving forward for the recertification. We have already had individuals who have been recognized. That recognition period is only good for 3 years. So toward the end of that 3 years, the group really drilled down the details of what was necessary for their next recognition period of another 3 years. And they used information from other states as a comparison as benchmarks to move forward. So most recently, the work group policies and procedures procedures and the training coordination procedure. Those were presented to the SIEC last month. They were approved. They have been updated. Now the Arizona Regional All Hazards Communications Unit recognition procedure, which is a mouthful, is what I'll be presenting for you today for discussion of possible approval. Okay, I believe that we did include the procedure after your presentation, so if you do want to follow through with me. First things first, hopefully you noticed the change. We have updated the template. We are using the new PSCC office template. This, as we move forward in our office, will be used for SOPs to provide consistent document sections, including on the back of the cover a record of changes page, so that there's no question as to when this document was revised prior or which version is up to date. We also updated the title. Again, I mentioned we were trying to encompass the entire communications unit, so we changed COML, replaced it with cont unit. This document describes the national process for certification. We kind of tried to separate things out to show there is a national process for general certification, and then beyond that, we have the state recognition process for Arizona regional recognition. In this case, it applies to positions that have an associated DHS curriculum and textbook. And it's very important, the reason why I'm highlighting those words. Currently, the only positions within the COMS unit that meet these criteria are COML and CONT. They both have a class, they both have a textbook. However, we know that coming down the horizon, as OEC has informed us, other positions, the Incident Communications Center Manager, the INCM, and the radio operator, RADO, will also have classes and textbooks. The revisions that were made this year are made in the hopes that, truthfully, you guys, next year I hope to stand up and say, this document stands, we're just giving you an update, we don't need to make any changes. Eventually, as OEC and FEMA EMI come out with additional courses, and it may not necessarily be FEMA EMI, depending, but when the additional courses come out, we will already be prepared for it. Okay, so to the nitty-gritty. Starting with the background, we did add more information. This is a new section in the document. We described the National Incident Management System and ICS to give a little bit more background to anyone who's picking up the document so they understand where this falls. We also provide an overview of the COMS unit, a brief overview. Section 1.3, scope, we added a statement. The statement is, individuals interested only at the local agency level are not obligated to adhere to the following procedures unless required by their agency. Again, you're doing this to separate out the fact that there may be some individuals who complete the COML training, who complete the task book and are signed off and are working at their agency, but they do not wish to continue on for Arizona regional recognition. Likewise, we all know the reality. There are some people that are working as COML that haven't had the benefit of the training yet. So we want people to know that, yes, this applies to anyone who's moving forward with the recognition program, but otherwise you need to work within the bounds of your agency. Section 1.4, we did remove the definition of COML. That's not a definition that we can change. And we moved the definition of certifying official in this section because that is something that we defined for the purposes of this procedure. Okay, Section 2, the National Certification Process Overview. This is a completely new section. It has some of the information that was already in the procedures previously, but again, we're making that delineation. The minimum national requirements are this. You need to meet the prerequisites for the course. You have to have knowledge of management principles, knowledge of tactical interoperable communications plans, knowledge of technology in your area, radio systems, and you have to complete certain ICS courses, 100, 200, 300, 700, and 800. That's number one. Number two, you have to complete the course. Number three, you have to complete the task book. That is nationally prescribed. That's nothing that we are changing, so that is what we've included in Section 2. Beyond that, we describe a little bit further what it means to each of those things. So Section 2.2, the position task book, it explains the role of the task in the certification process. It is integral to being certified, and further, if an individual wishes being recognized. agency certification. We beefed this up a little bit to further solidify the necessity of the individual to be certified by his or her agency. Again, I know that in the beginning when the program was new, there was we wanted to be absolutely agency associated with. And a few other states, but I do believe, like Tennessee, for example, they're SWIC signs off. So we wanted to make it clear that is not the case in Arizona. Section 3, Arizona Regional Recognition. This is another completely new section heading. We reintegrated information about the application process and the task book back into this procedure. Again, we haven't changed the process that they have to follow. We've just changed how it's printed out in this document. Individuals, if they want to be recognized, they first have to complete the national process and be certified by their agency. That must be an Arizona agency, which we defined earlier in definitions. Beyond that, they can submit their complete application materials. We have a checklist, information provided in the appendices, and they can be reviewed by the work group for recognition. Most everything stayed the same. The recognition renewal section was described as broken down into more detail. So prior to the end of the recognition period, that 3-year period, an individual has to provide certification by an Arizona agency affirming that they continue to meet the requirements. Now, this is important. We're not requiring individuals to complete another task book. That's not what we want. However, what's signed off in the beginning of the task book, that agency certification, is what we want to see again, that this individual is still certified by an Arizona agency. In lieu of a task book, the second sub-bullet, we want them to provide documentation of experience in formalized and recognized communication training exercises, those could be full-scale or functional, incidents and or events within that 3-year recognition period. So it has to be from the time that they were recognized until they're submitting the materials within the 3 years. Those can be in the form of IAPs, incident action plans, organization chart, any documentation. They have even pictures. We'll accept pictures along with documentation to show that they are working in that position and they have documented their experience. We'd ask compete individuals who failed to provide the required renewal request documentation prior to that 3-year expiration will be removed from the resource list. Now, on the PSCC side of things, we will be putting out information, put out a letter to the individual. We're looking at 6 months, 6, 3, and 2, or 6, 2, and 1, to notify the individual, hey, you're coming up on the end of your certification, this is what you need to do. So we're not leaving them out in the cold, but we do expect them to respond. If they don't, they'll be removed. If someone submits their renewal request documentation prior to the expiration of their 3-year term, then they will remain on the resource list until their renewal application is acted upon by the work group. And of course, the work group will review those applications during their prescribed application review meeting. Okay, last but not least, for the body of this document, or after the body, the appendices contain our updated forms. Appendix A is the submission checklist, and really there are only 2 changes from the format that it was before. After the individual provides their name and contact information, there is a line, position for which you are applying for recognition. This makes it good for all positions, COML, COMT, at current time, eventually RADO and INCM. We've also asked now for their rank or working title just for additional information. Appendix D is the agency certification form. So, for example, if there's an individual that has completed their task book in another state, they have all of their experience, but the certifying official is from another state agency. When they come in, they would be required to fill out this agency certification form and be affiliated with an Arizona agency. Likewise, this is the form that would be used for an individual who's applying for recertification. They would fill out the top portion. And then the bottom half, removal of agency certification. This is also a form that would be used if someone is changing agencies. They can show they're leaving one, moving to another, or if an agency official is removing their affiliation. Are there any questions about the form or any of the content that I worked through? Okay, of course, if the commission approves the procedure, we will post it on our website. Our interested parties list is growing. It's about 900 people now. We will send it out. We also have in queue a bunch of updates for our COML webpage, including the updates to these forms, which are included in the appendices. We have provided fillable forms for individuals to make it easier. We will also provide more information about communications unit positions, further detailed descriptions than what we have in here. And we have in Arizona, All Hazards cont passbook. It's very similar to the COML passbook. And we will update the FAQs to be in line with both COML and cont. Okay, I will open it up for any other questions.
Susan, this is Dave Bunce. How are you?
Hi, Dave. I'm fine. What can I do for you?
I just had a question. Has there been a discussion about a crosswalk to the NWCG COML, National Wildfire Coordinating Group COML?
As far as we're trying to combine the two or showing the differences between the two?
Well, as I go through it, and I was looking at COML for NWCG, many of the minimum quals are the same. And I just was wondering if at the NIC level they discussed crossovers for state COMLs into the national system to get onto a ROS resource list.
I think they're actually staying away from that. There are some differences between the fireside COML versus all hazards. For example, fireside, as you're probably aware, a COML must first be a certified COMT. It's different in the all hazards program. In all hazards, a COML does not have to be a COMT. So I think there are some programmatic differences that wouldn't allow that crosswalk at this time.
And Susan, this is Tom Wallace from DHS OEC. If I can, add to some of the differences here between the NCWG COML and the All Hazards COML is from the National Emergency Fire Center. The COML that comes out of there, that's typically a cache of radios that is always VHF, it's always this number, it's always programmed this way. So their COMLs are dealing with a very static set of radios. They know what they get, they know what's coming up. All hazards, one of the big differences tactically with the all hazards COML is the all hazards COML, it's what you have in your region. You're not going to get a cache of radios, you're not going to get towers. It's the same everywhere you go in Arizona or anywhere else in the country. And that was, for us, for officer communications, that was the biggest delineation. Now, if there's something we can do to help somebody, understand that, if somebody wants to be both, that's great. But understand, there are significant tactical and procedural differences between the two.
And the training. Right. An individual who's taken the NWCG course cannot apply for recognition. They actually have to take the all hazards. Cannot apply for all hazards recognition unless they've taken the all hazards course. Does that answer your question a little bit, Dave?
Yes, and it's also now starting to occur with EMI in a lot of all hazard position specific training, and I think, and this is just an editorial comment, that's going to cause some issues between what the all hazards groups are doing and NWCG when we look at resources that we can put on fires. But anyway, thank you for answering my question.
You're welcome. I'd like to add some thought to that. This is Lisa Myerson, Dave. Thank you for bringing that up. I do know that this is an area that was discussed and debated significantly at the federal level and at the multi-state level before the recommended guidelines came out at the national level. And certainly in our state, all of our discussions have been that we want to see all of our COMLs that are currently wildland fire certified go through this additional training and hopefully use their experience on wildland fires to become all hazard certified. I mean, that's our motivation. I don't see any reason that can't be. The issue, however, is that the Red Card program is far more advanced than this program is. This is in its infancy, really, whereas the Red Card program and the call out at the national level of Red Card certified COML is much more sophisticated and is a national program, whereas this is pushed out to the states to develop their own. And so I do think that we can continue to learn from the Red Card program and the Wildland Fire Certified COMLs, I think, in our state because of the importance of the need to fight wildland fires in the state every year. The systems that are in place, we continue to want to learn from those systems in terms of actually being able to get to a place where we can utilize all hazard COMLs similar to how red cards are used, but not necessarily, blurring the lines in terms of the additional training that might be required to handle some of the systems that someone who historically goes out on fires would need to handle in the middle of the metro. So I do think there's some difference in terms of training, but I do think that we can learn a lot from Red Card, and my team continues to try to look at that as a model for trying to look at actual deployment. Because we haven't seen yet a lot of deployment in all hazards. Nationally, we haven't. And that's really because it's so bifurcated and it's not a national program. So those are some other thoughts that I had.
Other questions for Susan? Okay. Anything else from anybody on the phone? Okay, with that, I believe, Susan, you were looking for an approval of the Arizona Regional All Hazards Communications Unit recognition.
This is Mike Worrell. Move to approve.
Thank you. Second.
Steve Campbell, second.
Thank you. Steve Campbell, second.
Steve, thank you, Steve. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you, Susan. That passes. Next on the agenda is a U.S. Department of Homeland Security Office of Emergency Communications update. Tom Wallace is here to present. Thank you, Tom.
Thank you very much, Aaron. Good afternoon. For those of you that don't already know me, my name is Tom Wallace, U.S. Department of Homeland Security. Office. Yeah, well, we're used to taking rocks. That's what we do. Out of the Office of Emergency Communications. The CISSP up there, we'll get back to that. That's going to come back. And why does a radio guy have an IT security cert in there? Org chart. Don't memorize this. This is in the process of changing. I put it up there. How many of you in the room are familiar with the National Communication System? Show of hands. Anybody? Okay, a few people. Between FEMA and Office of Emergency Communications and the folks at the National Communication System, some other federal groups, somebody in the White House finally realized, wait a minute, we've got 20 different groups all looking at their federal communications. It's kind of crazy. Executive order came out, I believe it was in June, that said, you guys need to line this up a little bit better. So we are going to have a bit of a reorg. FEMA's pretty much staying where they are, but National Communications, Office of Emergency Communications, and some of the cyber folks are going to line up a little bit better. I'm not going anywhere. I'm still your regional coordinator. Your NCS guys aren't going anywhere. But what you are going to see is you're going to see folks like myself doing, because especially as we're seeing LMR world go a little bit more into the IT world. Sure, maybe we're still using LMR, but it's your backhaul. A lot of that's going IP now. So there's a push that we can actually help with cyber assessment. Some of the folks, your physical security advisors from Department of Homeland Security, they're kind of lining up. We're going to be the same organization. The only difference is instead of being in 3 or 4 different organizations, we're going to be in the same box, but it doesn't change what we do. So I just want to give you guys a comfort level, if you will, that yes, people back in D.C. are fighting for each other's cubicles, but out here in the field, it's really not going to have much impact for you, other than potentially more in-line, better coordinated deliveries for you folks. Support. Broadband, all the fun stuff. I'm not going to talk the whole slide. You have Dr. Michael Brick here who can run circles around me on broadband. A couple things kind of interesting came up in a briefing to APCO from Department of Commerce and TIA. One thing I found really interesting was, it's not very bright, but rural coverage prioritization. Department of Commerce and TIA came out and said, we don't want to do a population-based formula for serving the rural folks. I'm really curious to see what that's going to be. If you're not going to do a population-based formula, how are you really going to support those rural folks at the potential cost of large metro areas? So just stand by that. That should be kind of interesting. Secretary Napolitano in the broadband legislation was called out as the point person for Department of Homeland Security, part of FirstNet board moving forward and decisions to be made. My office has, delegated, no surprise, that some of the cabinet level is going to delegate that a bit. That came all the way down to our office. So moving forward on broadband efforts, we're going to be right in the middle of that, which, that's a good thing. We do have one potential conflict. Typically, as feds, when we work with tribes, our policy has been deal directly with those tribes. Don't go through another county agency or a state agency and create some kind of conflict. If we as a federal agency are going to go work with tribes, we'll talk to them directly. Unfortunately, some of the legislation that came out, where broadband came out, actually has us, on one hand, going directly, and then the other part of the legislation says, no, we're going to go to the state SWIC's office before we're allowed to talk to a tribe. So, it'll get worked out, but if you hear something kind of crazy about that, that's where that's coming from. September 25th, FirstNet Board is going to meet for the very first time. For those of you that are familiar with broadband, the expectations of that meeting are just incredibly insane. That's going to happen at the Hoover Building, Washington, D.C. Anybody happens to be there, that's great. Room's only so big. But there is a webinar, or a webcast, if you will, and they're going to have a phone number you can dial and listen. Mike will probably have it before I do, but if he doesn't, I'll go ahead and provide it to Lisa Myers and her staff. You guys want to listen to that? Honestly, what you're probably going to hear is 2 hours of, here's a subcommittee, here's a subcommittee, here's a working group, here's a subcommittee. But it will be very, it's a good thing you started, but it's going to be kind of interesting. Okay, National Emergency Communications Plan, we're all familiar pretty much with Goal 1, Goal 2, Goal 3. Goal 3, it's going to be, the whole emergency communications plan is going to be rewritten. A lot of folks are worried, hey, we did Goal 1, we did Goal 2, now we're ready to do Goal 3. We've actually have to help people relax. We're writing the entire plan. We're not writing it because there's anything wrong with it, but any decent plan, you're really using a plan instead of shelf and gather dust. You exercise it, you measure it, and you find sometimes you're using the wrong thing to measure something you shouldn't have, or hey, here's something we missed. So it's probably going to happen in quarter 1, quarter 2 next calendar year. You're going to see the new National Emergency Communications Plan, well, and updated. And what you'll probably see is at the end of that, probably April, May, June, you're going to see what this new Goal 3 is. So I wouldn't expect to see any measurement efforts for a Goal 3 until that federal fiscal year 14. So I wouldn't have a lot of stress about that for a while. One good thing, I'll get this a little bit in TA, especially for you guys here that really push Goal 2, push it really hard. There is extra resources coming from DHS. That's kind of a reward. Hey, you guys went out, you were honest. You said, here's our gaps. Here's some things that we honestly can't do right now. We've been given extra budget, so that's what folks who are honest about that. Say, okay, tell you what, let's help you with that. That can be engineering, study, support. Is that more of a tabletop? Because it is there, but people didn't know how to use it. All right, let's talk about technical assistance. This year, it's going to change significantly. Typically, in the past, we've been technical assistance. How many of you know what technical assistance from DHS is? Okay, but technical assistance is the broadest service, it's a broad range of services. We have everything from exercise experts, AZPSIC certified master exercise planners, all the way to engineers who can help you with your coverage file. So I need 700 megahertz tower here, I do it, so I need that there. We have a whole range of folks that can do stuff like that. Each state is encouraged to submit 5 requests each year, and not always all 5 of those get approved, but typically, I'd say 2 to 4 get approved depending on what their requests are. Some requests take more resources than others. And we have a large group of people that come out and will help state, local, and tribal agencies with some of these different requirements. What's different this year is we've always started October 1 to give us your request, and then come about February, we'll actually call you back and say, okay, we don't have the resources for your number 1, but we'll give you your number 2. And then that leaves us 6 months of the federal year to get to you and knock all these out. Well, what typically happens is we have staff that are idling for 6 months, and honestly, we end up with resources, I won't say budget, we end up with resources at the end of our fiscal year where we can't do anything with. So we've actually been going out to folks, you guys, Lisa Myerson, the state has actually already requested TA. Come October 1, we're already boots on the ground delivering this. And what's really nice about that is
we're going to have a second round. We're going to have a third round of going through and looking at what you needed. Right now, I think you guys only got one approved, and that was an operational tabletop. But the good news is, that's what we're already talking about now. It's not even October yet. Normally, we'd be having this discussion in February or March. And so what that means is, as we go through and we knock these out, we're going to come back to you that second and third time and say, okay, let's talk about your second choice. Let's talk about your third choice. So for the state and for local agencies, that means you're going to get support, more support. Whether it's engineering type stuff or whether it's exercise support, broad range of stuff.
So from a budget point of view, just increase, decrease, or stay flat this year from last year, nationally, not particularly.
I would say that if you look at things, because broadband is its own funding stream now for TA, if you look at Goal 2 type stuff is its own funding stream. The initial funding stream, I can actually say if it's increased. I know it hasn't decreased. So I would say if you look at these other things from me, I would say it has increased. And not only that, I think what's going to happen is because we're knocking it out, I think it's going to help us really justify increasing it for the following fiscal year. I mean, I've gone before. Okay, what's going on within the region? Arizona is awesome for me. It makes me look very good. I could probably sit home and not do much because just the COML discussion Susan was up here talking to you guys about. Susan was reaching out to folks over in Hawaii, helping the guys in Hawaii hear how do we do COML? How do we recognize COML? What kind of procedures do we do? I have had many states and different agencies come to me and say, hey, what do we do for COML? I point them at your website. My job's done. I go back to work. I go back to sleep. California has actually asked Susan to come over for their COML Act in October. You know, hey, how are we doing this? You know, what are you guys doing? They kind of coordinate, learn both ways. Your outreach is awesome because it's not, a lot of states are lucky if they can do outreach within their state. You guys are doing national level outreach. You guys are doing these webinars. I know Justin did a thing on the environmental and historical preservation still part of grants. That is, it sounds kind of abstract, but a lot of grants fail because there's this one little sub-piece of it, this one component. So that's a national level service going out to everybody in the country saying, hey, here's our lessons learned on this, and here's how maybe to actually get your grant to go through. Broadband. Michael Britt, I'm actually kind of disappointed I'm surprised he didn't end up on the FirstNet board. He's a national leader on this guy, on broadband, on what's going around the country. I actually call him when I have questions about broadband, sometimes more than my own office. Let's see, Arizona, what else in Arizona? I am in the middle of talking to, and it's just been emailed so far, I haven't met her yet, a lady named Faye Platero, Navajo Nation. I don't know if you guys, I believe they're up here around Widow Rock, somewhere around the state line of New Mexico. We're going to look at, what were they looking for? I believe they're looking for radio coverage type stuff. We want to put up some kind of radio system or see how we can enhance it. Nevada is a step or two behind you guys as far as you guys have errors. They have something you put up called NCORE, and right now they're working pretty hard on the governance. Like you guys have already kind of worked out a little bit of, okay, is it monitored, is it not monitored, how are we going to actually work this through? California, a lot of you may know about Los Angeles. They ideally have this $500 million radio system to try to push out the door. Like any kind of government procurement of that size, especially with all the levels of, Fed, state, and county stuff involved in that. Unfortunately, they're not moving forward too fast on that. The California legislature actually modified some of their rules on how grants work and don't work. That we'll let that move forward a little bit more. But I'm really concerned they're going to lose maybe hundreds of millions of dollars of federal grant funds in that. It just has not moved forward. Bay Area, Bay Ricks, if you will, it's moving forward only because they cut down the size of it. They realized they weren't going to get all 17 nodes up of the system. I think they cut it down to 4, so it's really not covering the whole Bay Area. But the system, they got it up and they're learning some stuff from it. Another fun thing in California is Oakland, City of Oakland. They decided not to go with the regional system. Nothing wrong with that at all. They went with a particular vendor for the radio system. They turned it on June 2011. As soon as they did, all the public safety folks, firefighters, the police unions, everybody was complaining, hey, I'm in the middle of a traffic stop and my radio's rebooting. my MDT's done all this other kind of crazy stuff that's going on with the new system. For whatever reason, the boots on the ground guys are not getting a lot of support. The President of the United States flies in, it was June. Not flying through Oakland, landing in Oakland, and staying in Oakland for a while, attending, I think it was a fundraiser lunch or something like that. For 3 hours, the SWAT team and the motorcade guys that are that defense in depth, that second and third layer protection of the president, all of a sudden have no comms. So, right now there's a little bit of finger pointing going on over there between the radio vendor, FCC's been pulled into an investigation. FCC can't comment, and yet unofficially they're saying, well, there actually may be an issue with some AT&T towers that were too close to our radio towers. So, lots of fun out in California. One thing's happening down here in Southern California, October 9th. There's a large comp check, if you will, roll call. Orange County, Riverside, and San Diego. I believe Imperial County's been invited. Just basically everyone's rolling out their command posts and their comm trucks. Going to go through everything in the NIBOG, see who they can hit, and then also hit the other regional mutual aid channels and see what comes up and what doesn't. National Guard's involved, Coast Guard's involved, Border Patrol involved. Hawaii, their SWIC office is moving from State Civil Defense, which is for you guys like ADEM. It's moving over to the CIO's office. That'll probably happen within the next 4 months. See, Guam had kind of been stalled with some of the interoperability efforts. You imagine a small island, how much interoperability do you need? Now, they still have some challenges. They have a new Homeland Security advisor, which is all of a sudden talking to the SWIC going, well, how come the fire chief or the police chief or public health wasn't there? And, as any of us in government, you've got to get that politic answer. Well, sir, the schedules are busy. They had other priorities. And I was there for 2 weeks as this discussions were going on. And the first day of the planning session, all of a sudden, there were fire chiefs and police chiefs that I'd never seen before. Not only that, they weren't in the back of the room going, I'm here, okay, fine, I want to get out of here. They're actually engaged. And they actually said, okay, let's make this work. So nothing else, I don't have to come back as often, but they were definitely engaged. It's really good to see. Northern Marianas Islands, they are pretty much at the point they need. They've got moto turbos. They got a very kind of like low-tech radio system, but they've got to the point where they go from island to island. They got one radio. They're happy. So right now they're working on basic, SOPs, how to do this, and some exercise. American Samoa is actually pretty excited. They're about to get their first what we call professional grade radio system. It's going to be a P25 voted VHF system down there, and Durham Communications out of Mesa won the contract. So I'm hoping that turns on in May. They really need it down there. They still have cars and transformers sitting up in trees from the last tsunami. So they could really use that. Let's see, that's pretty much what's going on in the region. Coordinating efforts of groups, Justin and Lisa support the Regional Emergency Communications Working Group. What this group is, it's a very broad range of folks. You have everything from Aries, RACES, Army Mark, Air Force Mark, all the way to state-level folks. The good news is you hear a lot of different things. You get a feel for what different NGOs are doing. The challenge is for someone like Justin or Lisa, where you've got broadband or you've got these grant issues on your mind, those really aren't going to come up and really get solved there. Now, for that issue, that's where you have Lisa as the chair of the Regional Interoperability Committee. We meet at least twice a year. We do a little bit more with the phone call. The benefit of this is we can talk to other state-level folks about these issues, broadband, grants, maybe what goal 3 is going to be. So once again, you guys are showing leadership in this. Are there any questions? I know it's a shock. It's probably one of the shortest federal slide decks you've ever seen. All right. Thank you very much. Thanks.
Next on the agenda is a Pima County Wireless Integrated Network update. Paul Wilson, you present.
Good afternoon. I'm going to take from Tom's conversation now, trying to bring this down to a local level and to give you an update on the project that's going on here in Pima County. It's been about a year and a half since I last updated the Commission on the status of our project. There's been quite a lot accomplished in that time frame, so I'm really excited to be able to give you an update today. For those of you who haven't heard the initial discussion, I'm just going to real briefly go through a couple things. Our project, it has a very large scope. It's really inclusive of three components. One is the implementation of a regional public safety communication system to serve multiple public safety agencies. The second is the construction of the Pima Emergency Communications and Operations Center to be a multi-agency dispatch PSAP and emergency operations center. And then also supporting the renovation of the City of Tucson dispatch facilities for their police and fire entities. So this afternoon I'm going to give you a brief update on each of those activities. I'm going to start with the dispatch facilities, just give you a real quick thumbnail of where we're at on those. As I mentioned, there are two facilities that we are renovating. The first being the Pima Emergency Communications and Operations Center. That building will co-locate the dispatch and 911 operations from the Sheriff's Department and a consolidated fire dispatch operation that will serve the majority of unincorporated Pima County. Additionally, our County Office of Emergency Management, the EOC, will move over into this facility, and this building, like the Thomas Price building, will provide backup services for the city 911 dispatch. That companion project then really is the Thomas Price Service Center, and that will continue to house the dispatch operations for Tucson Police and Tucson Fire. Additionally, it will provide backup to PCOT. So the big gain in all of this is that in the Tucson community, we will significantly enhance the level of 911 backup services that we have available to us. The status on both facilities, the PCOT construction is substantially complete. The certificate of occupancy was issued on August the 31st. The county has taken ownership of the building, and we're now starting to install the technology into it. The City of Tucson is managing the project for the Thomas Price Service Center, and that is currently in its design stage. I think we had a report about a week and a half ago, David, that they're actually started their 90% construction document phase now, so it's progressed a little bit further than what I'm illustrating on the slide. They're currently trying to schedule coordination of the completion of that facility with the schedule for standing up the new radio system to try and help overcome some of the issues that they have relocating some of the legacy radio equipment within their communications center and the implications for that. And what I'd like to do just then is to walk you through just a few photographs of Pima County's in the building and give you a visual, pictorial, walkthrough of what this facility looks like. An exterior view from the northeast of the facility, the public entrance, the lobby. This is the new Emergency Operations Center. I think at the end of the day, we ended up with about 70 positions or so in the main operations center, and then additional seating for support staff and breakout rooms at either end of the room that will accommodate about 25 people each. This is one of those breakout rooms. The main corridor through the facility. Real nice, this is the employee entrance actually, so this patio area was retained from one of the original building features. Break room. This is the main dispatch floor where the Sheriff's Department and the County Fire folks will work from. As I said, we'll have full-blown backup capabilities. This, I believe, is actually the Tucson Police backup area. You see all the furniture installed, it's just awaiting the technology on the desktops. This is the main server computer room. And then with that, I'd like to walk you through some status on the radio system. Just want to get to the right page. So one of the things that's been a major accomplishment of the project over the last few months has been the completion of all of our governance documents. Those of you that have been following the project since voters approved it back in 2004 know that we've been through a couple of different iterations of our business plan. So as the project has progressed, the scope has changed a little bit. Some of the things that we envisioned have changed or evolved during the life of the project. So we've come to a point now where it's time to actually get people to be signing their signature to paper and committing themselves to operating on the system and to some of the ongoing operations and maintenance expenses. The county was a recipient of an IUCGP grant that allowed us to hire Buford Goffert Associates to come creating these documents. Many of you may know them from their work that they did in the Phoenix area, assisting with their governance development. And so they've worked with us over the last several months. I'm very pleased to say that 2 weeks ago, our Executive Management Committee adopted the update to our business plan and also accepted and approved both the IGA and the governance exhibit that gets attached to that. So these documents are now being distributed to all the agencies, and we'll be working with them on a schedule for getting those executed by their various governing boards. The project really consists of three main components, and I'm just real quickly trying to show here how those are purchased and installed. So at the top lane, you really start in the upper right corner where you make the purchase of your radio system, or at least define its design, and your vendor. From there, then we were able to identify the specific sites that we would be using and the microwave and networking components that had to go into those. And then once you've kind of figured out all those details, then you can figure out what you need to do at the sites in the way of either building new facilities, new towers, communications links, etc. We have really completed all of that work. And we're in the bottom lane now. We've got activities going on in all three of these areas. So you buy it in one direction and you build it in the opposite direction, basically. You construct out the sites, you construct out your microwave and network, and then you construct the radio system. And there are activities, as I said, going on in all three of those areas, and I'll just brief you on those now. In site development, we have a total of 28 sites that are being constructed. Site development began in December of 2010. We have 14 of those sites completed, including the prime site, 10 sites are construction, 1 to be constructed by others, and then we still have 3 site agreements that are pending. 2 of those are on the Ton Automation. The other is Chimamont Hill, and we've actually got the red line version back from the property owner there, so we'll be able to move that site-specific agreement forward very quickly now. The project also includes 10 dispatch sites. The facilities at 5 of those buildings are complete. 3 are under construction, and the other 2 are on the Ton Automation. We've had to kind of split our project up into 2 phases, with phase 2 being the eventual build-out across the Ton Automation. We've not yet been able to get the agreement to make use of the communications facilities automation or do any type of construction there, so we've had to kind of pull that scope out to a phase 2 project. But all the other aspects of the project are moving forward. We expect the site construction to be complete by December of this year. The next phase really is the microwave build-out. And again, we've got a number of activities going on there. Essentially, the microwave and radio vendors are both doing cold installs. So as far as the microwave goes, our design was complete in August of last year. In January of this year, we received and staged all of the equipment in Tucson. And the staging and testing was completed in March, and about half of those sites are currently installed. And as the other sites become available, then the equipment is being populated in those as well. Similarly, on the Motorola side, Motorola is going to be providing an 800 megahertz trunk simulcast system for us. The fixed network and dispatch equipment has been manufactured, staged, and factory acceptance completed. They've begun installing equipment at the available communication sites and dispatch centers. And as I said, phase 2 of the project will include the build-out across the Ton Automation. The next big activity that we've got going on will be our subscriber order, and that to be completed in the coming months. Our project, unlike many other regional projects, is doing something a little bit different, and that is that our funding allows us to actually provide subscriber equipment to the participant agencies. So we'll be providing both mobile and portable radios. You see the specifications for those on the screen. The installation of the mobile radios being included, and accessories and batteries and chargers, all those kinds of things with the portable radios also being included. We're really defining what the base offer is, if you will, and then there might be options available to each of the agencies if they choose to upgrade the equipment. If so, then there might be some additional costs to them to do that.
Paul, I'm curious. This is Tom Wallace from DHS. What are, especially on the portables, what are those replacing?
A variety of pieces of equipment, because we actually have in the neighborhood of 29 agencies that will be participating in this. Some of them are coming off of UHF, VHF, some off of 800, some are using Motorola, in our case, EF Johnson, others might be using Kenwood, who knows. It's a combination of many things. And with that, then, we're going to take questions. Lisa?
So, delays, obviously, as a parent in a project of this size, biggest areas of difficulty and lessons learned, because that's always the most juicy stuff that we get to avoid.
A couple of things. Probably the thing that causes the most delay in the project has been just the number of agencies involved. Just the number of people that you have to, it's kind of herding the cats kind of thing. Trying to keep everybody on the same vision, on the same track, and on the same schedule has been difficult. From a construction standpoint, I'd say that the site development, the whole acquisition process and site development process has taken far longer than anybody really envisioned that it would when we started the project. Those are probably some of the more difficult things. I think trying to manage the scope creep has been a bit of an issue, particularly for us where the bulk of the dollars are coming from county bond dollars. It can sometimes get easy for some of the participants to want to increase the scope of it when they don't have any particular cost to them directly. And so it's been difficult to kind of manage that. But those are probably the key things in this.
I may have missed this, but did you talk about the range or the coverage of the network, or sort of coverage perhaps somewhere out there?
So the coverage is designed to provide coverage both mobile and portable within Pima County. This is a Pima County funded project, and so our objective was, of course, to provide the coverage for our particular area. We do have a couple of agencies in our project that provide services outside of Pima County. We know that radio waves don't stop neatly at jurisdictional boundaries. There's going to be some spillover coverage. We'll have to determine if that really meets their needs outside of Pima County or not. If not, then we're committed to working with them to try to expand the coverage footprint to make sure that it does. We'll just have to find the appropriate funding to make that happen. As part of our project, though, we worked with the various end-user agencies to really identify where the specific service needs were. Pima County is about 9,500 square miles. Very much of it is rural or just not populated areas at all. And so we don't want to provide necessarily portable radio coverage into those areas. So we really identified varying levels of coverage based on the population areas, where the service needs are, and so on. Everything ranging from heavy in-building coverage to portable on tip on the street and mobile coverage countywide. Anything else?
Thank you, Paul. Thank you very much. Next on the agenda is National Public Safety Broadband Network Update. Michael Britt.
Tom Wallace for the kind words. However, as you can tell by my physique, I don't run circles around much. All right. Just some recent updates on the national scene for the National Public Safety Broadband rollout. As part of the schedule, the NTIA and Department of Commerce were to appoint FirstNet board members, which they did mid-August. They also provided the guidance for the state and local grant program as much as they could. It's a work in progress because they'll have to find out what FirstNet has in mind first. Then we'll go through Arizona-specific, Digital Arizona program that we hope to work closely with, and then some individual education and outreach approaches. Okay, so on the FirstNet board selection, there was really not a whole lot of surprises. They picked good, solid people for their various roles and responsibilities. The one item of note was the legislation said they should have at least 3 public safety individuals. It turned out they picked 4, and 4 relative, what I consider really solid for representing public safety on that board. The NTIA grant guidance had some key elements that they expected to be worked into the grant guidance, which is going to be more formalized and started on Q1 2013, I guess. Actually, that's a typo. So, first quarter of 2013. Establish or adjust the governance structure for Arizona. We have already determined the governance structure. This body works in concert with the PSCC office and basically just taking our existing governance. Develop procedures to assure local and tribal representation in the education and outreach, and also develop the education and outreach process and delivery. And then to identify possible public safety users of the system so we can get some kind of inventory and some kind of volume of users data. They also strongly suggest working out some kind of standard approach to rights-of-way permits and so forth with local agencies, if at all possible. And then coming up with staffing plans and outreach data collection process. They plan a 2-phased approach. First is education and outreach, kind of get the word out. And then once FirstNet has some time to figure out exactly what they're going to do on a national basis, then determine what data needs to be collected to plan to build on using that data. What does this mean to Arizona? Just an overall observation, the $134 million for R&D, the SLIC-P grant process, and the $7 billion for build-out is generally perceived or recognized as not enough money. So you need to be frugal, inventive, creative, whatever adjective you want to throw on there. So we're taking that to heart. Arizona itself has multiple initiatives in different disciplines that all need a fiber backhaul network to be effective, and that fiber network needs to cover as much of Arizona as possible. So either it's health, education, government, public safety, they all need the same thing. They all require education outreach as to what this means to local, rural, metro jurisdictions. And each of the disciplines has their individual message, but common to all of them is the infrastructure to support it. And then the local jurisdictions, it would be a novel approach for state government to come with a single coherent message. So, all right. I want to introduce Mike Golden, who is the director of the Digital Arizona program, who we've been collaborating with just by our very nature. We both have a long history in IT, and we know that, economies of scale and those kind of things work out really well if you're actually going to the same goal.
My first question.
Sure.
Regarding some of the timelines, so I know this is just getting started, first meet. Can can you just kind of recap some of the decision points, and specifically, are there going to be specific matches and match amounts, and when will you have that conversation for budgeting? Yeah.
State and local implementation grant program, $134 million, is 80-20, where they can possibly waive the 20, or they can possibly take in-kind resources / infrastructure / whatever, yet to be determined. Really rough estimates on projecting. We start in Q1 2013. Given they're managing 50 states all at once, it'll probably be 2 years on the planning, implementation, and planning. And in that time, they will have, first step, will have been negotiating with vendors nationwide, utilities nationwide, this and that, a lot of different factors, come up with a series of plans, or a plan, and then the earliest they see is 2 years out before you kind of build beginning. Okay. So somewhere in the middle of that 2 years, they'll be discussing with the states what kind of data they need to help them make their decision. Okay. Is that where you go?
Yes, exactly.
All right.
I'll be back.
Oh, Justin, how many minutes? Just forward presentation on your forward. Forward.
Oh, okay. You already went.
Well, thank you, everyone, for spending some time listening to about a program that doesn't have a necessarily direct relationship with the things that you're interested in. So I hope in a portion of my presentation you'll be interested in just as citizens in the state. And there's another portion which I think you'll see a direct synergy and a direct relationship with your missions in the public safety space. This conversation kind of began, you have to be careful when you take, I've been designing advanced network technologies for 40 years at the national and global level. And then I wound up in cubicles, 6 cubicles apart from Michael Fritz, so it creates real trouble when two network geeks start talking to each other. But the project that I'm running began with a $6.3 million federal stimulus grant to basically map the existing broadband resources that are in the state of Arizona. And another, that was for about half the money. And if you go to digitalarizona.gov, you can see the interactive maps that allow you to look up by community, by individual address, by any kind of boundary area that you want to, what kinds of capacities are being offered by the 77 providers in the state of Arizona. The other half of the monies were to be used for planning and technical assistance with local communities, especially rural communities, to give them the resources to be able to start to figure out how to improve the capacity and the quality of the broadband resources that they have in their individual communities. So when I took on this gig, Aaron was just coming in as my new boss shortly after I got there, and he sort of twisted my arm and said, you know, when we were changing EDA to being asset, we were cleaning out bookshelves and we found these multiple large 3-ring binders where millions of dollars of federal money had been spent to do studies and to figure stuff out. None of it led to much impact anywhere in the state. Let's not do this with this program. And so he didn't have to twist my arm very hard. So we have been very aggressive relative to other states in what we've actually done with these monies, and that's part of what I'll be talking about this morning. So the mission is now to implement a sustainable and leverage broadband plan for accelerating the transformation of economic growth, education, healthcare, business, and probably should say the quality of public safety there as well, especially after the conversations I've been having with Mike in Arizona. And the word leverage is key. Arizona is a very conservative state. The government is not going to pay to build broadband networks out per se. The state government is not. And so we have to find ways to incentivize the private sector to make investments, especially in rural Arizona, where the return on investment calculation is a very difficult one because there's small populations, geographically diverse, low density, and it's very tough to make it pay out. So when I first got here, I started looking around, well, what's an asset that the state has that could actually improve the incentives for the private sector to make those investments? And I saw the highways, and I said, gee, you know, if you could build fiber down highways, that would, and provide the right-of-way along that highway at a relatively low cost to private providers, that would remove a major piece of the cost of actually standing up broadband capacity or digital capacity in these rural areas. And so I coined the term 2 highways for the cost of 1. Then the director of ADOT quickly disamused me and says, well, it's not really, it's nearly the cost of 1. conduits down the side of a highway if you have access to the right-of-way is roughly equivalent to the cost of putting the paint stripes on the highway. It's a dramatically low cost compared to the cost of building the physical highway infrastructure. So that became the primary approach, and we said, well, let's see if we can get a law passed to put the teeth behind that. So we began with Aaron's tremendous help, and as he said, a great expenditure of political capital. We got a law passed called the Digital Highways Bill, which basically changed the definition for the Department of Transportation for what transportation consists of, being not only the transportation of vehicles and people, but the transportation of information. What that did was provide the legal basis for us to start to say the rights-of-way that they already have for the highway can now be used for the construction of conduit at a dramatically lower cost than it normally would cost. Private providers tell us that the cost of doing a fiber construction project, about half of the dollar cost and 2/3 of the time is consumed in right-of-way issues and permitting processes. So one of our commitments is to begin to start to work with communities all over the state on a voluntary basis to have them come together and begin to come up with standard permitting processes, accelerated permitting processes, and also echoing the federal executive order, which the President has asked all federal agencies to come together and simplify their processes and turn them into a single process, such that it accelerates at a national level building the broadband. We think municipalities can do that same thing. So why does it matter at all? Ultimately, it's about GDP for the state. We found some studies that indicate what happens when you start to increase the average speed that's available to a particular geographic area, population in a particular geographic area. And so the MIT study compared two counties, one that had invested in the expansion of broadband and one that did not. And as you can see, the GDP or the sales per capita in the county with the broadband grew twice as fast as the counties without on an apples-to-apples comparison basis. Broadband deployments increased employment by over 5%, and larger impacts were felt in smaller and rural communities than in urban communities as those increases were made. There's a Chalmers University study that says every doubling of broadband speed increases the GDP by 0.3%. Well, that doesn't sound like a dramatically large number, but if we apply it to rural Arizona, you could potentially have the following impact. The annual GDP today for rural Arizona is, for all of Arizona is $277 billion. The 15% that is rural of that, if we increased by 0.6, in other words, we did a 4x increase, taking people from 1 megabit per second to 4 megabits per second, as an example, or from 3 to 12, would increase the GDP by 0.6%, and that's equivalent to $250,000 of recurring increase in rural GDP in Arizona. That would be year over year over year. There's another study down here, 200 of McKinsey Global Institute. The Internet accounts now for 21% of all GDP growth over the last 5 years in developed countries. We're 21st in per capita. So Arizona has a lot of catching up to do with other states, and the country has a lot of catching up to do with other countries in regard to this new capability. So the strategy is to accelerate the building of digital capacity using lean government by harnessing existing taxpayer-owned assets. That's the highways. It's also canals. It's also working with power utilities. Anyone who has infrastructure that can be harnessed to lower the cost of getting this fundamental capacity out into the rural parts of the state. And then we are working aggressively. I have started to talk now in various outreach programs to a lot of the different rural governmental organizations and private organizations about starting to come together as communities and begin to working on best practices for improving permitting, simplifying and lowering the cost, and basically providing an incentive for the private sector to make these critical investments. And it's been amazing how much positive response there has been from communities all over the state. And then one of the things we need to work on as part of that process is, as in 2014, as the original federal grant runs out, we need to have figured out how to have this be a sustained process that continues to go on for the next several years, causing this capacity to be built. And one of the things that's happened that we believe will start to support that sustaining capability is when the law got passed, major fiber construction companies and contractors around the country started phoning me up saying, we love this law, can we talk? And we'll bring money. So we're now in conversations with a number of very, very large private companies who are saying, in exchange for access to the right-of-way along the highway, we will bring the construction money and do the construction to build this capacity down highways. Now, these are very preliminary conversations, so I make no promises that they're going to come to fruition, but they're very, very promising because they actually can see the return on investment argument as a reality for themselves to make that investment. So, a point that I want to leave you with is that last century, what caused Arizona and the country to grow was the creation of spectacular infrastructure. We handled water systems, we handled highways, we handled electricity, both in urban areas and in rural areas. Pretty much you can go anywhere and you can always light up a light bulb and you can always get a drink of water. Broadband is not so evenly distributed. In the major metro areas, broadband services and capacity are actually pretty decent. But once you drive outside them, blue line that's on that map, they tend to fall off a cliff. And so what we need to do is find ways to cause for digital capacity, same kind of even access everywhere that happens to these other fundamental features. So one of the things we've done is created governance mechanisms. Aaron chairs a Digital Arizona Council. It has 21 slots and it's filled with 20 members. And they represent these kinds of interests. So ADOT has representation. Obviously, they're a major player at the table because we have to use highways to implement most of this program. AEE Education cannot actually do the transformation of our educational systems unless they have the underlying broadband to be able to do the delivery of digital curricula, distance learning, so that the bright high school kids at a rural place can connect to university professors. All of these technologies are available, but what's missing is that underlying capacity to be able to allow those kinds of technologies to really be used. I like to kind of joke that once a society decides that flush toilets are a good thing, and they start to put them in, all of a sudden they realize they need to have a sewer system. Well, broadband is that sewer system. People don't pay attention to what's going on in terms of the backhaul, what brings the capacity from the global internet to individual homes, schools, hospitals, and so on. It takes in infrastructure investment, and we need to start focusing on that as a state, and we are focusing on it as a state. So anyway, this organization has 6 task groups focusing on economic development, on education, on telehealth, and on the strategic plan for the state. We are just about to publish a strategic plan. We've had a task group working on it now for several months, and we finally decided we're going to do several versions of it. So the complete plan is 185 pages, and even the authors can barely get through it. And so we've also done a truncated version that's 65 pages that really kind of summarizes and explains what the plan is about as a narrative. And then we have a shorter version that's only 14 pages. I call it the Cliff Notes version. And then we have a Cliff Notes of the Cliff Notes, which is only 2 pages. So everybody should find to be able to read that. So we've had 24 meetings of these task groups, these 67 participants, and these are the kinds of issues that we're looking at. How do you, demand aggregation is an interesting one. The way most of the communications infrastructure has been built historically in the state is it was done on a case-by-case basis, creating silos. We just learned yesterday that there are 512 T1 circuits going into ADOA. Why is that not a gigabit per second, fiber connection? And that's happened all over the state. So one of the things we need to start doing is proposing coordinated plans. Another thing I discovered when we first started looking at this was, out of again the historical telecom infrastructure, there are some SONET pathways on fiber in the state, but they're all strands and segments. None of them interconnect to one another. There's no fundamental statewide areas that are poorly served today. The second thing that we did, a couple of interesting things we've done in sort of side conversations. In a lengthy conversation with John Lukenthal, the Superintendent of Education for the Department of Education, we said, we got into a conversation, well, how much bandwidth is enough bandwidth to make your educational programs really work? And so the first thing we, of course, hit upon is that education, along with the internet in general, is moving heavily to video. I don't know how many videos you guys get in your emails, but it seems like every third email has a video that I should watch. And education is doing the same thing. A lot of the course material is all delivered as video instructions. If you're familiar with something called Khan Academy, it's where kids get a little 15-minute lesson on something, usually with video, and then they take a quick quiz on it, and then it branches them either to something remedial or moves them on further. All of that takes a digital infrastructure to be able to deliver. And so the question again was how much bandwidth is enough? And we figured that a high-definition television stream, 1080p, whether it's for entertainment or it's for education or it's for telehealth, is kind of the fundamental unit of video connectivity. And that works out to be, in today's technology, 6 megabits per second. And if it's a two-way connection, that needs to be 6 megabits per second down to the student or the television set, and 6 megabits out back into the world. And you start to then extrapolate what does that mean that a school needs to have, even in rural Arizona, or what does it mean that a government agency in rural Arizona needs to have, and you very quickly get to some large numbers. And the other just comment in general is television over the next 5 years, I am predicting, will be moving nearly completely to the internet, and it will be much like web browsing. You'll be able to find any television content that is created from the moment that it's published and downloaded instantaneously online. Perfect video, no jitter, no spinning wheels, full screen, and that movement is fully in force today. So this was the model that really sold most of the stakeholders in the state. I don't know why that's breaking up on the screen like that. I mean, the video I'm going to show you is going to look terrible. But if there's a highway going down, a section of the state, the idea is to take a trench and put not just one conduit to hold fiber in it, but multiple conduits, so that we have it future-proof for at least 100 years. That's the design model we're looking for. It's very easy to go back to empty conduit and pull additional fiber through that conduit. The second issue is the fiber. The highways are not always necessarily adjacent to where the communities are. So it turns out that modern point-to-point radio technology allows cell towers to be repurposed, not only to deliver mobile services to the people who are driving down the highway, but to also put dishes on those same towers horizontally aimed at specific buildings within these communities. And the current radios for about $60,000 a pair can deliver 1.5 gigabit per second to any building within those communities, and you can put multiple dishes on the towers. So, and this began part of the conversation that Michael Britt and I were having, which is, well, gee, it seems like the same problems have to be solved in many ways with the public safety broadband network. So why aren't we sharing those trenches? Why aren't we sharing those conduits? Why aren't we sharing those tower spaces? And that's a whole different issue than sharing spectrum, which is more complicated, may come to pass. But just sharing these physical resources can save an enormous amount of money, both for public safety projects as well as for what we're doing. So if you've never seen conduit, it looks like the plastic pipe that you see the drip lines in your garden. It's just PVC pipe. And inside that are these things called microducts. Each microduct can have multiple fibers pulled within it. So you can wind up with hundreds to thousands of fibers in each cluster of conduits in a trench. And each fiber, of course, can potentially carry the entire electromagnetic spectrum. So the amount of information that you can send down a trench is absolutely enormous. And then the towers allow you to find the practical, low-cost way to meet that capacity into individual communities. So one of the things that we did was we said if we can reach 20 miles on either side of a highway, let's start tracing state highways. Up until the executive order, there was no provision for using federal highways or freeways. So we had to use state highways. How many miles of state highways would it take at a 40-mile swing, 20 miles in each direction, to reach the majority of the communities in rural Arizona? And it turns out it's somewhere in the range of 2,300 to 2,500 miles of highway would need to have the fiber trenches built along them, and we could reach 98% of all of the populated areas of the state with amazing amounts of capacity. So we translated that in dollars, and we said roughly 25 to 50 million a year, 7 to 10 years. These are all just guesses. really know. And depending on how the private sector steps up in these conversations that we're having, and what happens with our ability to work together for instance, to provide the capability where we're already providing it, funding it for public safety without using public safety funds, and then find ways to use public safety funds to get to the areas where there's no business case that can be made to get a private sector provider to build in those areas. And so by looking at those kinds of issues, we think we can solve a lot of fundamental problems. So this is just an argument about the 100-year future-proof thing. A single cell tower with 1.5 gigabit wireless beams emanating from it can serve 150, 100 megabit simultaneous internet connections. 625 megabit simultaneous internet connections, or 1,800 different high-definition TV streams, or 5,400 internet high-definition streams. Now, of course, as you're passing on a highway, passing a community, you can have multiple towers that are each doing that. You can also create redundancy by coming off of two different highways in different directions into a community. This is the digital highway law. I think I pretty much covered that on earlier slides. The Department of Transportation is kind of getting it because this is something they need to focus on. They don't have any highway funds to build highways, and if we start bringing money in for conduit builds, they begin to start looking pretty favorably at actually putting their resources to work. So we created for ourselves with the digital highways law, like I said, we created our own unfunded mandate. So our job now is to go out and find the funding, and we're working on doing it. And I think this will just start playing. If I click it, is that right, Justin? One more. Okay. So, before this starts, actually, don't actually start it. Part of our grant is to distribute about $600,000 to local communities, local rural communities, for doing digital capacity planning and technical assistance. And we decided to do that by going through the councils of government, the 4 regional councils of government that are rural, and that's beginning to work very well. We've gotten them to agree to stand up broadband committees within their economic development committees, and to begin to look at the issues of what do they need to do to better and improve the digital capacity that they seek. And
so, Mike, we've only got about 10 more minutes for a meeting and about 3 or 4 more agenda items. Is this something that's available online by any chance?
Yes, you can find this. If you go to digitalarizona.gov, basically all of this material is there. And what I was going to show you, and I'll cut it short, is that we created several toolkits that we're providing to our rural communities. One is a decision matrix for how to decide where and how to prioritize the build. The next tool provides basically economic analysis, gap analysis capabilities, and there is an economic planning tool built into our digital map that shows you pretty much everything there is to know about any given community in Arizona. So those tools are being very well received by the local community. Anyway, good. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, sir. I'll bring it back to Arizona 2050 Broadband Network. All right. This is basically just a summary of the Digital Arizona project. I want to come back to the key drivers in the guidance from the SWIC-B grant process of developing procedures for local tribal representation, education and outreach process, the identification of users, and the plan, which we'll have to develop before we even submit a grant for SWIC-B funds. And working with Michael, what we've done is taken his roadmap, taken it down to individual road segments. So, for example, State Route 260 between 89A and 89, 47 miles. We identified what COG it is, what Regional Education Center, what RAC, what EMS governments statewide. The EM contact is sheriff's office contacts, so on and so forth down the line, all the anchor points, police departments part. That way we have a framework to hang contact points to make sure everybody's getting the same word when we do our education and outreach, and we get feedback from them on what their requirements are. Okay. We'll able to unify our contact management and information gathering so that it all holds up, fortunately, to one office, the asset office, that we can actually plan and using the same kind of data.
And coordinate with others.
And coordinate with whatever funding and whatever action. And we'll be also bringing in utilities, bringing in everything we can think of to help reduce costs and overhead. The map, this is just an example of taking every county and identifying which regions, depending on which viewpoint, whether it's education or public safety and so forth. Again, we're focusing on how we're going to do education outreach, the commonalities, needing fiber backhaul, how we're going to use ELB, which is part of the grant and all. Decision later, and we'll be able to come up with good, solid cost models for public-private partnerships once we get there. Okay. A couple other things that have been mentioned: statement of requirements out of NIPSTIC, gone through 3 rounds of review, 250 pages.
Okay. Goodbye.
Page review that'll last until the end of the final delivery on that will be toward the end of the year. One thing that came out of it and one thing that came out of emails that I received were, well, you got a lot of technical requirements, you're talking a lot of broadband stuff, but what are the operational requirements? Turns out that DHS and OEC and others are working on those as we speak, and so we'll have a lot more boots on the street, hands-on, what does it mean to me? Kind of information coming. All right. And then we're doing a panel discussion with the Utility Telecom Council in Tempe coming up. The review of the plan hasn't changed much. Checked off 2 more bullet points for August 20th and 22nd for NTIA, and the next thing is the corrected date, Q1 2013.
Update on the 2013 future office plan.
So I'm going to be fast since we're out of time. Can somebody drive? So I can stand here so they can hear me. So we have an office plan every year. We develop a SCIP, as you all know. That was approved by our PSCC in July. We develop a plan that says, with my limited resources, what are we going to do to help advance that SCIP, and what other things do we have to do to keep Arizona on the national picture relative to public safety and interoperability. So, next, please. Thank you. And that's done. So we don't, this basically is an informational plan for you. If you have questions, concerns, recommendations about the plan, please call Justin or myself. The plan is structured pretty much around the roles that we play. Arizona's interoperability coordinator, advancing the SCIP, obviously reporting, logistics of all of these meetings, the commissions and the committees, etc., and then obviously outreach and engagement. We do go through in detail the projects that we're responsible for that we're going to be working on this year. And then there's some good, next slide please, appendices which analyzes what we're doing against our statutes and what gives us the right to play this role, and also how this ties into the SCIP with the statute. And also we map the current projects to the SCIP initiative so there's no uncertainty about all that. So I'm not going to go through all of the initiatives because you guys are pretty familiar with all of them. I will say we're in gap closure mode, obviously, this year for everything from NECP Goal 2. So that was a huge effort last year. I will put particular note, page 9 includes the roles that we play, whether we do a implementation, consulting, or support role, or an oversight role relative to some of the initiatives, and who's responsible for initiatives. For certain initiatives, DPS is responsible for certain initiatives, the regions are responsible for, and we play a supporting role. Also on page 25, it lists all the programs that we're going to be advancing this year. This is what we have on our target list. Theoretically, we could add something, but I highly doubt it. This is way ambitious with the level of staffing we're at this point. And I'll also note for you that on page 15, there's a list of where we're at with the TICP and CASM initiatives, which is the governance-related initiative, which is one of the initiatives that we're particularly targeting out of NACP Goal 2 to make sure that we're getting those tactical plans in place around the state. That brings a lot of people together. As you know, if any of you who've done TICPs, the plan itself is the plan, when it's all finished, but bringing everybody together to say, how are we going to do this, and what resources do we each have, and how are we going to coordinate together, there's a tremendous amount of benefit from it. Then the plans are obviously very useful in the sense that if you do bring in someone from the outside, they can have an understanding of what they're working with in terms of who's got what, so that they know what the assets are involved in a particular jurisdiction. So we're continuing to push that heavily this year. So that's governance projects, PSC projects. You've heard about some of them today, obviously, the communication units, the minimum equipment standards, etc. We continue on some of those projects this year. The technology projects are reviewed. Training and exercise is going to be increasing focus this year, which is appropriate. We spoke finally through with NACP Goal 2, which is not exactly training or exercise, but with a little bit of both. But now it's time to move forward into the training and exercise more heavily. Obviously, we've been talking about COML, COMT, but there's lots of other things to discuss in that arena. And you'll be hearing about some planning on that at the next meeting. Our funding levels are pretty consistent from this year to last year. When this initiative was originally at DPS and came over to us, it was somewhere in the $1.4 million. We're now doing, I think, as much or a lot more than was being done before with $500,000. We're supplementing that with about $250,000 in federal Homeland Security grants a year. We actually have on hand $400,000 worth of grants, but we're spending down at approximately $250,000 a year to accomplish all of that you're hearing at every one of these meetings and in all of our status reports that we're accomplishing. As that money starts to dwindle, and it is starting to dwindle, the amount we got last year and the amount that we got this year is just down, down, down. Like all of you, nothing new to you. I mean, you're experiencing the same thing. We're going to have to look at whether we're going to need to cut back on the scale of what we can do, or whether we're going to need to try to advance collectively some sort of initiative on bumping those funds up, back up, pursuant to which the general fund appropriation went way, 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 way down to sort of bear what we can survive. And now we'll see if we can push it up a little bit in the next couple of years as those grants dry up. The broadband grants, I would assume that a ton of that is going to go out to outside consultants to help us do a lot of the work, and very minimal will be left in the pot for us to help with the coordination, maybe a little, that might help. But I don't expect a whole lot of broadband money from anything else coming for quite a bit down the road, so we're not counting on that money to supplement and make up for what we're missing in the federal grant area. We currently do have 4 full-time SEs in the office, myself, Justin, Susan, and 3 of the 4 positions, are filled, the 3 of us. And then we do have Michael Britt is actually a contractor for us, and Karen Allen is half-time contractor, hopefully moving to full-time. And we are in the market for a new contractor, aggressively trying to hire someone to continue to accelerate our spend down in the federal grants, because as you know, we got moved from a 3-year cycle down to a 1-year cycle, which potentially with a statewide program showing initiatives can actually, if you twist their arms, might get a 1.5 to 2, but still they're expecting aggressive spend down on the federal grants that they are giving out. So that's where we are. If you know of anyone who's interested in working with us, we're still fun and lovely, and clearly very busy, as you can well hear. Let us know. And any questions from the commission or anybody in the audience, I'm happy to answer those questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Paul, an update on the SIEC.
Lisa was brief to try and get you to be able to conclude your meeting at a reasonable time. I will try to be equally brief. The SIEC met on August 14th in Phoenix. It's in the screen a number of the topics that we had on our agenda. The first two you've already taken up earlier in your agenda, so there's no reason to talk about those further. What I really wanted to focus on briefly is the AIRS Improvement and Sustainability Plan, partly because we intended this to be a discussion item to see if there was any comment or input from the Commission as the plan progresses to reflect your input. As you know, AIRS has really been built out throughout the state. Presently, the maintenance of AIRS is really an exclusive responsibility of DPS Wireless Services. However, there's been interest from local communities to begin to expand the coverage footprint for AIRS. And so that really necessitates putting together a policy and procedure on how we might accomplish that and transferring some of that responsibility then to the local communities. And so to that end, the staff's been putting together the draft Arizona AIRS Improvement and Sustainability Plan. I want to walk you through just a couple of the elements of that now and see if there's any comments or input. As I said, we're seeing interest from various areas of the state to expand that coverage footprint. And so what we're looking to do then is to give some responsibilities to those local entities for funding the projects, for getting the permissions to use individual sites and or for acquiring the sites where they might build out, for doing the equipment purchases, installations, and the ongoing maintenance. So we envision that the local agency being responsible for determining the site location and then working with DPS to coordinate the project. As you can see, we kind of expect a process whereby the local entity would give some communication to the Department of Public Safety to coordinate the engineering aspects of this, if you will, and then also completing an IGA with DPS. Also, a requirement that the agencies notify the PSCC office anytime they're planning to use Homeland Security grant requests for the project. So we would see any of these new sites that are being developed locally as ownership residing with the agency that's implementing, that the agencies be responsible for the maintenance and repair of the site infrastructure and the equipment, that they hold any maintenance contracts for accomplishing that, reporting the equipment issues to DPS. One of the concerns really is that today we have a single point of reporting and responsibility for monitoring the health of the AIRS network, if you will. And as other agencies then start to assume some of that responsibility, we still want to have that single point of contact to know what's going on. So there needs to be communication between the local communities and DPS to make that happen. There would also be some expectations as to how quickly repairs can be accomplished if there are equipment failures and some requirements for doing preventative maintenance and maintenance of spare parts. We're really getting now into some of the support documentation. We envision a process whereby after our local communities work with DPS, that they are really putting together a package of information now that comes to the SIEC for approval. And then the next couple of slides kind of get into that particular process. Largely it is gathering a bunch of support letters from neighboring communities, from the RACs and other sources, and then submitting those into the SIEC. We expect that the DPS would maintain some site documentation and information on the overall status of the system, and then still be that 24/7 point of contact and maintaining repair records. Again, it communicates the importance then of the local community communicating with DPS to be able to do that. So we're looking at letters, an MOU with the DPS, a site application form, input and system documentation, kind of see all the points on the slide here. I'm not going to belabor the point right now because we really want to kind of get to the point, the input from you. But so we're looking at a process whereby the communities would submit information to the SIEC for its review and ultimate approval. think that's coming to the commission for approval. I thought you were going to say SIC. That's what I thought. Okay. And I think I'm just going to leave it at that. Other than to say the next step is to continue with the revisions to the draft. It was briefed at the SIUC meeting. I think the intent is to publish it for public feedback, but we also wanted to get feedback from the commissioners in the event there was any prior to completing the revisions of the draft for the SIUC approval. So with that, I know I've been brief, but I think I'll just pause and see if there's any questions that either myself or staff can answer for you, or if you have any comments or feedback.
I just have one question. Which are the communities? Can you identify the communities that are showing the greatest interest in this?
The PSCC office and Wireless Systems Bureau at APS, we've had both the grant from Yavapai County this year, which kind of helped to kickstart all of this, but there's also been some discussions out of Canal County on how to improve AIRS coverage, specifically a concern with, I'm failing the name of the mountain event down there every year. The Western Country Center, thank you. That particular area becomes one of the largest cities in Arizona for that festival and then diminishes. And so there was some concern on how do we address those issues. And then just generally there's a couple of other pocket areas. While there is no more funding for DES to expand out AIRS, that we should at least provide an opportunity in about the more jurisdictions who want to go through the grant process to find other funding sources and to be able to get petitions to expand the AIRS system out, be a part of it.
Thank you. I think what's really encouraging about this is that it's really beginning to demonstrate the importance of the AIRS asset to the state for our mobile communications for public safety, particularly in some of the smaller rural communities that get used to it, I think, quite a lot. When we start seeing the interest in trying to expand that, it really speaks to how useful that is. And then just real briefly, we had a couple of other things on our agenda. I think I'll touch base perhaps on just one, but we also talked about the technical assistance request that Tom mentioned, and the broadband project plan and approach. One thing that Tom briefly mentioned that I'd like to just give you a tiny bit more detail on. A couple of weeks ago, County, in conjunction with the PSCC office and the FCC and others, conducted a day-long workshop in Phoenix to help bring some information to anyone who's constructing public safety communication sites in Arizona about the environmental and historic preservation requirements that go along with those and the regulations from some of the federal agencies that govern. We had a really good event. We had speakers from the FCC, from the Tohono and Salt River Indian communities from their tribal historic preservation offices, from the State Historic Preservation Office, and a couple representatives from Pima County's Sustainability Office. They gave us some really informational presentations, and then we wrapped the day up with a case study session where we took 5 examples from the PC Wind project, ranging from what would seem really routine to the extreme, so that people could really kind of connect with what they're doing in their communities and then see how you go about getting the proper approvals, both from the FCC through the DHS granting process or from other federal landowners in order to properly build your communication sites under the federal watchful eye. I thought it was a really good event. We had 46 attendees from all around the state. People, as was pointed out at lunch today, that aren't typically really at these meetings or participating here. It was vendors, it was staff members from many local state agencies and what have you. And as I said, I think it turned out to be a really, really useful workshop. So with that, I'll conclude the presentation.
Thank you very much. Agenda item is PSCC office mobile project update.
And actually, the only item on that, as usual, we do have a multiple-page handout for you on all the different projects and activities that are going on. And so I won't go through all of that for you. But I would like to call your attention to the 2013 PA request. As Tom had mentioned earlier, this is a process that normally we have kicked off in October. We have come back to your body in November, and we finally meet with Homeland Security and submit these requests in December. Well, this year that cycle started very quickly, and from the issuance of the catalog at the end of July to the TA request deadline was actually the end of August. So it all moved very quickly to the extent that we've actually gotten the very first award announcement already. We received a number of comments, both at the last SIUC meeting and then comments from the public. We again submitted 5 requests on behalf of the state after consulting with Homeland Security. Those requests are listed there. 4 of them were requests for the statewide, and then as Tom mentioned this year, there was a specific line item of technical assistance support dedicated to NECP Goal 2. The Office of Emergency Communications suggested 2 options for us. We chose the communications-focused tabletop actor, and on September 7th, we were notified that for the NECP Goal 2 technical assistance, we've been awarded that TTX. So our office is now going to go out, and the purpose of this TTX is going to be to help the county demonstrate the gap closure activities they have done since their Goal 2 assessment, to be able to show all the different accomplishments they have done. So that initial TA will be kicking off here in a couple of weeks and working there. We do anticipate that there will be further technical assistance awarded much closer to the normal notification period that we come to expect at the beginning of calendar year 2013 when that second round of technical assistance awards comes out. But there's a handout, very last page in your packet that goes through all of that. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions the Commission might have.
Okay. Thanks, Justin. Any calls from the public? With that, I will call this meeting to adjourn. Thank you very much. Thanks, everybody on the phone.